should talk a little bit about CRESS WATERCRESS,
Oh, yes.
which is newly available. Esteemed audience, just came out as you're listening to us, or if you're listening to us after the release date. Good news, it's been available for a moment. You can go, you get your copy of CRESS WATERCRESS. So true to my word, I promised you that I would not make you sit through me summing up your biography or your book. What does esteemed audience need to know about CRESS WATERCRESS?
Well, CRESS WATERCRESS is a chapter book for kids. I hate to say who it's for, really. When people ask me at bookstores or libraries, they raise their hands and say, well, who is this book for? I mean, one book, this adult novel you wrote 4 years ago, is 220 pages, and it's a grown-up book. And this novel, which you published with the Children's House, is almost 400 pages and is a children's book. How can we tell the difference? Who is this for and who is that for? And I always say, my books are for anybody who likes to read Gregory Maguire books. And all you have to do is read the first 4 pages of anything and see whether you feel like reading the 5th. If you feel like reading the 5th, then the book is for you. If you don't feel like reading the 5th, then put it aside. It's either for somebody else or maybe it's for you later on, but not right now. So I don't really want to say exactly who it's published for, but I will say you're right. It is published as a children's book by Candlewick Press, and it has some of the most glorious illustrations in it that a book has ever benefited by. I think if I am clear on what you're holding up, you probably have an advanced copy, and so the artwork is in black and white rather than in color. In the finished novel, the artwork is in full color. Oh yes, and it is just glorious. They're like stained glass windows as chopped up in a Cuisinart. They're just full of color, shards of color on every 4th page has an illustration in a 210-page book. So, but what is it about? The CRESS WATERCRESS is the name of a rabbit who, at the beginning of the story, has to move with her mother and her baby sister out of their private rabbit warren, where they've lived happily with their father for a long time, across the forest into the bottom basement apartment of an apartment tree. They have to move out of their private home and move into an apartment building, as it were, because their father, the father of the family, has disappeared, and the mother can't keep the family together on her own without neighbors around to help out in a pinch and to babysit the kids when she has to go out. So they leave their comfortable home, they leave their old life, and they move into a place where they don't know anybody else. And CRESS, the young rabbit, is waiting and hoping that her father will come home and hoping they can go back to their old home. But meanwhile, they're stuck in an apartment tree called the Broken Arms. And she makes new friends. She meets other tenants of the building. She has lots of adventures. And that's as far as I'll go as to plot. But I will say this, Rob. I will say that I have written quite a few children's books, more children's books than adult books in my time. And a number of them are books that I'm very proud of, particularly What the Dickens, the story of a rogue tooth fairy, which is what it sounds like, a tooth fairy going haywire, and Egg and Spoon, which is, that's the fat 400-page children's fantasy set in turn of the century pre-revolutionary Russia, when the Tsars still ruled the land and Baba Yaga the witch roamed about in her house on chicken legs. That book, incidentally, has been optioned by Universal Studios for a movie. Much though I love those books, What the Dickens and Egg and Spoon and others of my children's books, I think CRESS WATERCRESS is the book for children with which I'm the happiest. I'm so pleased that I got to write it, and so thrilled beyond measure at how beautiful Candlewick Press has been able to make it look.
Wow, those are it's a bold statement.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel that way? I feel that way about every new book is my best book ever. Do you feel that way, or do you know when you've got CRESS WATERCRESS, this is something really special? I'm going to write my next book, and it will also be nice, but it won't be this moment here that I'm having with this book.
I think that you know when you're having a moment. I think I knew I was having a moment with Wicked when I wrote it. I thought this may not work for anybody else, but it's working for me, and I've hit it. I've hit enough of what I tried to do so that I'm not going to retire in embarrassment. For me, it's a case of, like, to use a metaphor that maybe isn't really apt, but it's a case of how close to the bullseye are you going to get, boing, when you shoot an arrow toward a target and you try to write a story that lands exactly where you think it might hit. And the notes that it makes as it soars through the air, bang, are all the notes that you hoped it would hit. Most of the time, I don't know how you feel, Rob, but most of the time I go, bang, but it goes, and it kind of lands someplace else. I'm usually happy with the surprise of it, but I don't always feel as if I've hit a bullseye. With CRESS WATERCRESS, by the time I reached the end of writing it, I thought to myself, this book achieves about 96% of what I set out to achieve by my own measuring stick. And to me, like, I feel lucky if I hit if I achieve anywhere over 50% of what I set out to do. So to hit so many marks, I'm not at the beginning of my career. I'm 44 years in. I'm not saying I'm at the end, but I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning, actuarially speaking. So to hit so many wonderful notes and to have it sing as it flies through the air is really gratifying to me. And I don't expect to do it again, or not again soon. But let me turn the question back to you, as I like to do, and say, do you know what I'm talking about when I say you start out with a kind of concept of, oh, this is the book I want to write, and then you go on, and sometimes by the end of page 2, you think, I haven't got it, or I'm not gonna get there. It's not going to be the magical thing I can envision. Might be good, might be worthwhile, but it's not going to be this wonderful magical thing that is ideal. It's idealized in your mind before you start to write it. Once you start to write it, it becomes real, and then you have to live with the reality of it, which doesn't always measure up to the ideal. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
I do, although we should all bear in mind that I am talking to the John Lennon of fiction, and I am not even quite the Ringo of fiction. You've got about, 32 books on me. But I do feel with every project that it is simultaneously, depending on when you ask me in the process, it is simultaneously the most brilliant thing I have ever written and the worst thing I have ever written that's just terrible, and I should bury it and be done with it, and no one ever needs to see it, just depending on when you ask me. So I've learned not to trust me, just to go with where the story needs to go and then step away from it until I've got some perspective. But as much as you're ever going to get, it's like your baby. You know what I'm talking about. It's always going to be beautiful to me, no matter if the world thinks it's ugly. I still care about it.
No, and that's fair enough. And certainly there is always a moment, even in CRESS, even in Wicked, there's always a moment, or many moments, where I think, this is the worst piece of garbage that any human being since the invention of language has ever come up with. And then there are other moments where you come to the end of a paragraph and you feel like you could lift out of your body and soar in the air for about 9 feet up above the grass, because you're so happy with having caught something of what you were trying to catch in that particular moment. Both those are realities of the experience of writing, I think. Normally you come down to earth, and real life is somewhere in between. I suppose, to go back to CRESS, it's just that when I come back down to earth, I'm still more thrilled with what I think CRESS has achieved, and with who CRESS WATERCRESS is as a trembling little rabbit coming upon squirrels and nasty skunks and scary big bears and foxes who eat rabbits, etc. I'm really happy with how she engages with her life and who she seems to be at the beginning of the book and at the end of the book too.